Today we're going to talk all about front flipper knives. What to look for in that mechanism. What are some of the best knives that are available with it? Let's go ahead and get started. The way we're going to do this video is to start with the knives that are currently in my collection that have front flippers, right? And we're going to go from my least favorite front flipper, I'm going to say that a lot, to my most loved, okay? And so we're going to talk about what the problems are and what is being overcome as we move up the ladder. So the first one on this list is going to be the Migron, and this is the Pagos. Now, here, this is a perfect example of what happens when you don't expose enough of the tang. So because of the way this is set up, you have to push right here. But the problem is you fall off the jimping very quickly. And so it's not a very good front flipper. It's an okay front flipper, but you really have to get your hands here. You can't be up here. And so you really limit it on the spacing of where you put it. And there's this shoulder, which always causes an issue. And now my second one on my list is going to have a similar problem. But before we go to that, why do I like front flippers? Well, in many ways, it is more enjoyable than a back flipper without being in the way. So when you have a top flipper, or a front flipper I should say, you have the ability to really use the entire length of the handle, and you have enough clearance to be able to use more of the blade. So from a functional perspective, I much prefer it, but it still offers a fidget factor and enjoyment level, a different way to open it, and I think for that reason, it's something that I really like. I think the combination of thumb stud, front flipper is still one of my favorites, maybe my favorite combination in the knife world. So the Pagos is a fantastic knife, under $50, 14C28 with the titanium thumb stud, but it is not my favorite front flipper by any stretch of the imagination. All right, so next up on this list is actually my favorite knife from Petrified Fish. But from a front flipper perspective, it has all the same problems. And you know, I would in some level think it's even worse than the Pagos, but because it stands further up, it ends up being a little bit easier to use. The big problem here is this part of the handle right there. If this were to slope down where you have access to more of the metal exposed, then you wouldn't have as much of a problem. Like, I do find myself falling off of this front flipper a little bit too often. It's a good thing that it has a fuller to do reverse flick, although that's not particularly easy. So this is another great example of not having enough access, and that makes it kind of not ideal. An incredible knife, another sub $50 knife with contour G10, G Mascus they call it, 14C28, another one of my favorites, but not my favorite front flipper, not by a long shot. So the next one is the CJRB Echo. So this might surprise a lot of people. I think the Echo is another unbelievable knife from CJRB. So it follows that kind of pyrite-esque lines, but has the Ray Lanico ultimate ergonomic handle. He does some of the best handles in the business when it comes to folding knives. In fact, I have two front flippers on the table that are his designs, and I have to say, from a shape perspective, it's really, really good. Here's the problem with this particular front flipper. So when you try to front flip it, the problem is that it sticks out so far from the pivot that when it rotates, it can clip your finger slightly. That's the first problem that you run into. The second problem you run into that we're going to talk about quite a few times is the lack of proper jimping. So these are very far apart, and they're not particularly aggressive. They're not particularly grippy. They basically feel like, you know, raw steel. Like, they don't feel particularly useful. And so I think that that's where it kind of falls down a little bit, are in those two things. Being able to pinch a little bit, which could be changed by making this curved, but you kind of need to have a little bit more jimping here and here. The reason that that's difficult is if you see the spot right in the middle of this flat area, that's what's actually hitting the stop pin right there. So there's only so much they could do to change the design without, you know, getting a little bit too close to making it not rest properly on that flat pin, but it's an okay front flipper. It's just not the best one. So still better than the other two, but yeah, that's something that you're going to want to be made aware of. You want to check to make sure just how aggressive it is and make sure that it has the proper clearance. There are a couple knives like that, not on this table, but this one definitely comes up. Okay, so the next one is another front flipper from Migron. So this is one of their least expensive knives. I think this thing comes in around $27 the last time I checked. It is a hollow ground knife with a 14C28 blade steel. Another really good value knife, really chunky handle, very cool knife, really good action. And here's the thing about this. The front flipper has many of the problems that we've talked about with the Pagos, but it is definitely a little bit better because there's jimping all the way on the top. It's not as aggressive as I would like. It's better than the last one, but the problem is, once again, you don't have a lot to get access to. You have to put your finger almost exactly right here in order to launch it. There's just not enough place to move it. I feel like it's a little bit more difficult. This knife is better to put your finger on the top here and rotate out like this, but that's a real struggle for some people. So that's something that you kind of see. It just between the access here and the shape of this and the non-aggressiveness, it's just not my favorite. It does work, absolutely it works, but it is just not the ideal. We're going to keep moving up the ladder, and you can see how we're improving as we go. On the table is another Ray Lanico design. So this one, I think, wow, it's such a good knife. It really, really is. It's honestly not that... there's barely anything wrong. So first of all, you can see that in the Civivi version, there's a slightly more aggressive jimping, but it could be even more so, and it should be. That's the first thing. The second one is you'll notice the shape. The shape is a triangular shape, and there's nothing wrong with that. In this case, actually, it tucks in a little bit earlier, and I haven't had a pinching issue with this knife. So that is good. For some reason, it just seems to work a little bit better than the Echo did. And another amazing knife. This is another 14C28. Incredible ergonomics on the handle. I mean, I think he makes some of the best comfortable handles on all of his knives. I mean, he really nails them. Not much more to say. Good front flipper, just not a great front flipper. In fact, all of the rest from here on in, I would consider to be excellent front flippers. So let's go ahead and see what we have. Last 5 on the table. We'll start with Kubei. So Kubei does this incredibly well. In fact, most of the front flippers that I played with have been really, really good. So first of all, the thing I want to bring your attention to is how close the spacing is on these. It makes for a much grippier experience when you flip it. However, the problem with this particular knife is that same issue where the shoulder is just a little bit too proud. Not as bad as the others though, and so it does translate to a much better flipping experience. It just needs less of this like corner. Just having it be more rounded would allow it to work a little bit better. The other thing is, as you rotate it, this kind of comes up a little bit as well, in that it kind of reduces how much space you have. Not as much as it does here, but that's something to do. So this is a good front flipper. This is the Royale. It is in D2. This has gone down a lot in price, so it's a much better knife, much better value prospect than it was. Great action, excellent combination of opening capabilities. Another really, really good one, but not perfect. The next couple are just even better. You'll see. This is the best, my favorite knife from Kubei. It's not even close. This is called the Hide. It has a bunch of different ways to open it, but the way they have done this flipper tab is one of my favorite things ever. Look, it's almost full 360. It almost goes all the way around. It's almost a back flipper and a front flipper. And it has good jimping. Not great, but good jimping. You can top flip the thing. You can roll up the front. And my favorite thing is you can basically, because it's a small knife, it works perfectly, you basically use it like a back flipper. It just is that easy. So it's a really cool knife. And once again, 14C28. I also like this is a great example of, by not having a flipper tab, how much clearance you can get. Notice that the blade is angled slightly away from the handle, meaning you can get the edge down on a flat surface with your knuckles a little bit easier. It's going to be a little easier to do press cuts with this knife. Yeah, the Kubei Hide, one of my favorites out there, in fact. If you can get it for around 50 to 55, it's a really good knife. In 14C28, once again, you'll see that a lot with G10, okay? And yeah, great knife. Another from the same designer as the Royale, both of which are really good, but the Hide is absolutely my favorite, no question. Top three now, and the one we got to talk about is probably one of my favorite knives on the table. It's probably the one I would keep over all the others, and that is the Artisan Cutlery Boa. Now, this is a collaboration with Jonathan Shaw from Triple Strike Knives, and he just absolutely just nailed it. And they really did improve on the jimping. When I tried this at Blade Show, it wasn't nearly this aggressive, but they've done a good job. And in my opinion, he makes one of the best front flippers in the business. And it has this proud and steep incline all the way up to the middle. So really, anywhere you fall on this knife, you're pretty much going to be able to front flip it. So from here all the way up to here, you're going to be able to front flip it. And that is what makes this such a good, and I can't quite, it's D10's too good. D10's too good for that. But it is one of the best designs. His front flippers are some of the best. I actually could do with it even being more aggressive than this, personally. But the design aspect, where it's positioned, notice that this area doesn't actually matter because you're pressing up above that point. So there's plenty of place to roll your fingers because you're at an angle, right? And which really matters. And you'll be able to open it. So that's kind of what you're looking for. You want wherever your hand needs to be, you need to have enough clearance on the blade distance between the handle because you're actually coming at an angle. You're not going like that. You're not going straight across because you're holding it like this, right? So you need to be able to actually get access to it instead of reaching around. That's kind of what we're looking for. And this is exactly a good example of that. Okay. Top two. Now this is a surprise, but I think it absolutely deserves to be here, and that is the Vosteed Bellamy. So really nice and fine aggressive jimping. This is one of the best on the table. Really, really close spacing, really nice and aggressive, very sharp. You're not going to slide off. But in addition to that, notice the curvature. The jimping goes all the way around, and pretty much no matter where you run your finger on this knife, it's going to activate. It's fantastic. It's one of my favorites ever. In addition to that, because of its location, when I use any of the other openings, or I roll this over, I don't catch myself with that edge. And so they have alleviated some of the issues that I encounter with something like the Echo. They have increased jimping, which is really good. They have really good jimping all the way around here. So they've also done the back flipper really, really well. This knife, it has so many ways to open it. It has a great fuller, a beautiful hollow ground 154 cm blade. It's actually one of my favorite knives ever. Every once in a while I will carry this, and I absolutely enjoy the heck out of this knife. And is definitely one of the best front flippers that currently exists. So at least in my collection so far that I've tried. I'm sure there are better ones out there, but this is one of my favorites. Okay, so number one on this list, it is not even close, and it has to do with just how aggressive the jimping is. That has to do with the Miguron Arki. So even though the jimping doesn't go all the way around, the way this is shaped, I have never had any trouble with this front flipper. It is so grippy. It is incredible. I don't know why this knife works so damn well. It just combines a lot of the things we're looking for, but I think the thing that really makes it successful is that it has a crown spine, right? Meaning that it's rounded. But what they did is they made these really steep indentations in the jimping, and then they rounded the corners this way. So this is smooth, This is smooth, but right down the middle, very grippy, like really grippy. And that makes it one of the best front flippers that I've ever used. There's no movement whatsoever. I don't feel like I'm ever falling off of this front flipper. You can reach over the top and do it as well. But yeah, this is just certainly a different style. You can see how different all three of these really are. So there are dramatic differences in all of these. And if we bring in, where's another good example? If we bring in the, yeah, like the Hide, and then even, where's the Ray Lonicon design? These 5, you can see how every one approaches the front flipper differently. Honestly, this would probably be in the top 3, top 4 at least, if it just had more aggressive jimping. This works really, really well. Plenty of clearance here. Just needs more jimping. This one has perfect jimping, maybe a little bit too little clearance, but I've never had an issue. This actually does pretty much everything correct. The same thing goes with the Boa, and the Hide is really a unique version of the front flipper. I hope this was sort of instructional so you can kind of see what you're looking for. Whatever you do, if you're getting a front flipping knife, make sure that the access is good, like you're farther away from the frame where you'd roll your finger, like from the frame to the top of the knife. Make sure that jimping is good, right? And make sure that it stands proud enough from the frame that you can actually roll it. Because like you can have pretty aggressive jimping, but if you don't have good access, then it's not good either. I hope this is sort of a little bit of a guide. It's not really about the knives. Obviously, these are all really good knives, but definitely just wanted to focus on that aspect. I really enjoy the combination of front flipper and thumb stud. I think this is probably my favorite combination, as I said, and I definitely think that there are some good options out there. These are just some of them. As always, guys, I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for coming in. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and we'll talk again soon.